My name is Dave Schramm. I'm a professor and extension specialist up at Utah State University in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. And today I'd love to share some principles, some practices about showing understanding and compassion for children. And when I talk with parents, I like to start out by asking them a question. I say, to you, what is the purpose of parenting? What do you hope to achieve? What is the grand vision of all this? I think it's important to think about that because all of us have different views of parenting. I think there's at least two views of parenting. One is parenting is something that is exhausting and takes a lot of work and is very expensive, right? My kids take all my money. That type of view. On the other side is another view, and that is this is the most important investment that I'll ever make. One of the most important investments we'll ever make in our lives with time and resources and energy is into our children and building that relationship. And I'd like to review for a minute just the parenting pyramid, that principle, if you remember, with correction up at the top and teaching underneath that. And underneath the teaching layer is the parent-child relationship. And at the base of that pyramid is that positive, happy person, that positive, happy parent. So today I think let's jump above that positive, happy parent and go right to the parent-child relationship. I think there's some things that we can learn about building that relationship so children will be more open to our teaching and correction. So if we can get things in that order, invest our time really from the bottom up instead of the top down in that parenting pyramid, I think parents will be a lot more happy and effective. I started some research a few years ago asking empty nest parents. In fact, I've asked over 500 empty nest parents, empty nesters, so their children have moved out, they've moved on. And I asked over 500 empty nesters a few questions, and two of those were this. First, what regrets do you have looking back as a parent? And not necessarily make them feel guilty or to bring up these, oh, I shouldn't have done that as a parent. But really, this was a selfish study. I wanted to know for myself, I want to be the best dad I can be, right? I get one shot at this. And I want to know, I want to learn from the experts, those who've been there and done that. And so I asked them, what regrets do you have? And the second question is on the flip side, and that is, what advice do you have for parents today? What advice do you have? And I'd love to share a few of the things that I found from that study. So over 500 empty nesters, and here are a few quotes. Let me start with the regrets. Some of the regrets, and these are actually some actual quotes from some of the empty nesters, and they said things like, I would not take my stress out on them. I would have been more encouraging. Another empty nester said, not lose my temper as easily, be more sensitive to their feelings. Or another one, don't be negative to them, don't dwell on failures or mistakes. Another one simply said, less yelling, more hugging. And I think if I were to summarize all of these quotes from all of these empty nesters really into a few words, it would be more patience and less harshness. Looking back on it, those are the times, I think, when many parents, at least empty nesters, that they regret. In fact, there was not one empty nester, not a single one, that said, if I could do it all over again, if I could have my children back one more day, I would just spank them one more time, right? There's no one that said anything remotely to that I would just be more harsh if I could do it all again. No one said anything like that. It was just the opposite of slow down and don't lose your cool so quickly. Of course, they have a different perspective, right? They're kind of up here and we're down here in the trenches, and it's easy for them to say that. Much more difficult when we have two children grabbing on our leg and one crying and whining and say, yeah, you take them, empty nesters. This is hard. It's easier said than done. But what about the advice? On the flip side, here's some quotes from some empty nesters. They said things like, spend quality time with them. No matter how insignificant the activity, time is what is important. Another one said, read to them, play with them, love them, and tell them often how much you do. Don't be afraid to get down on their level and play. Another one said, learn about how children think, feel, and behave at all stages of young childhood. And I love this one. Another empty nester said, snuggle them often. Is there really anything better in this world than snuggling your child? I'll even do that, right? Some days I'll get up early, just a little bit early, and I'll sneak down into one of our children's beds and just snuggle them. just to love that, because that time goes so fast. Nearly all the empty nesters said something related to enjoy them while they're young, right? That time goes so fast. Just enjoy them. Enjoy every stage. Don't look forward to when they're, this stage or that stage or when they leave, because it goes so fast. My parents said the same thing to me, and it is, right? That time with our children goes so fast. So part of that is really to help put that into context in that parenting pyramid of happy parent, but here's that parent-child relationship. Can we teach them some things about understanding and compassion? And part of what I'd love to focus on is really the feelings. Feelings is really what sets us apart as human beings. Chaim Ganot, a great child, right, psychologist, he said, fish swim, birds fly, but people feel. People feel, and how we manage those feelings, and how do we respond to our own feelings and to our children's feelings, that can really help strengthen that parent-child connection, that level of the pyramid. So there's a couple ways that are less effective. Research shows that the first one is emotion dismissing. And all of us, even myself, I'm guilty of this sometimes in our lives. And we'll say things like, hey, there's no reason to be so upset, or hey, just get over it, or it's not that bad. And what that does, it actually discourages children from trusting their own feelings or from sharing their feelings. Because if I should just get over it, or it's not that bad, or there's no reason to be so upset, but that child really is sad about what happened. I'll give you an example. For a child, particularly younger children, they'll fall and they'll scrape their knee and they'll just start to cry, and they'll look up at their parent, and their parent looks down at their leg, and they can't even see which leg was hurt, right? And they'll say things like, "Oh my goodness, it's not that bad," or "Hey, just get over it." But what happens is that we fail to remember that we were kids once. And we fail to realize that their nerve endings are just starting to form, just starting to take place. That we're used to pain. As adults, we're used to pain. We've become accustomed to that. But then when they experience any kind of pain, they fall down and they skin their knee, their nerve endings, it actually erupts. It's like fire, and it sends the signal to the brain, like, you're going to die, right? It's this extreme pain to them. But for us, it's not. And so for us to be so quick to say, hey, you're fine. Just get over it. There's no reason to be so sad. Or lunchtime or mealtime when a child is hungry. How many of you parents have ever had that experience where you just finished lunch? 30 minutes later, you hear, I'm hungry. And you look at them and you say, there's no way you can be hungry, right? I'm full. We just ate 30 minutes ago. But again, what we fail to realize is that from their perspective, they experience pain, even hunger pains, different from adults. And their stomachs are different. Their metabolism is different. Their digestion is different. So they experience life differently. And so that's one of the keys to positive parenting, is really getting inside our children's perspective and creating real compassion and real understanding. So that's emotion dismissing. Another way of handling emotions that's not the best is emotion disapproving. So there's emotion dismissing, we dismiss the emotions. Another one is disapproving of the emotions, that you shouldn't feel that way, or don't be such a wimp, or especially for boys, we often hear, don't cry. Big boys don't cry. Are you crying? Don't you let, no, I'm not crying. You better not be crying. We disapprove of those emotions. Again, it's not healthy for children then, as they grow up, to be able to feel like, I can't show emotion. I can't express emotions because it's not accepted, especially for young boys. So a better way. Emotion dismissing, emotion disapproving. Yes, it's easier to respond or even react that way. A better way is emotion coaching. This concept has been developed with several scholars. John Gottman is one of those who's really helped this concept come to life. Emotion coaching is a healthier way to help children manage their emotions. And it comes with a few steps, about 5 steps. The first step is simply being aware of that emotion, watching, monitoring. Sometimes it's very obvious if there's a yelling or a screaming or a fear, but sometimes children are a little bit nervous if they're about to do something for the first time or they're unsure of themselves. Parents can just watch, observe, notice what your children are feeling, and then pay attention to that. A second step is recognize emotions as an opportunity for connection. parent-child connection, that's that level of the pyramid. That's really what we're after at this stage, is building that relationship. So recognize that emotional times can be an opportunity for connection. They're often those times we can learn when we're angry, frustrated, but not in the heat of the moment. But there are opportunities for teaching and for connection. And another one is, the third step is really to listen. Listen with empathy and validate those feelings. And I'll share an example in a minute. The fourth step is to label that emotion. When they fall down and they skin their knee, for example, they say, "Oh my goodness, you fell down. Oh, ooh, I'll bet that hurt." And so they realize there's labels for emotions, or "I'll bet that was embarrassing," or "I'll bet you were so excited when they came home." They come in the door and they share. When they're really excited, they have a big smile on their face. Then as a parent, you get excited. Even if you don't know what they're excited about yet, you get excited about that. "Oh my goodness, what happened today?" And then listen and validate and say things like, "Oh, that's wonderful. Oh my goodness, I can't believe you did that," or "Wow, you worked so hard." All of that kind of reassures those children, and they can trust their emotions, and they can trust you with their emotions. That's an emotionally safe space for them to share those emotions. And the fifth step is to set limits and then problem solve. Of course, when children are emotional, let's say they get really angry or someone took their toy, it's not okay, right, for them to slam or to pull hair or to call names. So that it's important to set limits and then problem solve. Now, here's an example. I'll set these 5 steps up for a real-life example. So one of the most important things we can do for a child when they're experiencing a strong emotion is hold up an emotional mirror. So we hold up this emotional mirror and we reflect back to them that emotion with whatever they're feeling. We simply reflect that back. For example, I pull up to pick up my daughter from dance, and she's maybe 8 or 9 at the time. I pull, like I do every Tuesday afternoon, I pull to pick her up, pull in the little parking lot. She opens the back door, she gets in, she slams the door, and she says, "Dad, I hate dance. I'm quitting dance. I'm never going back to dance." Now, there's a few things that, right, I could dismiss or I could disapprove of those emotions. Those tend to come up really easy. For example, what might you say in those situations? You might say things like, "First, young lady, don't slam the door," or "Second, right, you don't quit dance. We're not quitters. You're going to dance till you're 90," or whatever it is, right? We disapprove, we dismiss of that. Or we say, "Oh my goodness, you're such a drama queen. You're not quitting dance. What happened?" None of those responses are really helpful. They don't make that child want to share more with us. A more helpful response is holding that emotional mirror up. So that's exactly what I did. When I taught our daughter, she gets in, she slams the door, says, "Dad, I hate dance. I want to quit dance." So instead of the lecture or saying something that would be unkind or unhelpful, I turned around in my seat. Now, I didn't have a mirror with me, but emotionally I turn around and I simply reflect. And I said, "Dang, what happened? It sounds like you had a really rough day at dance." And so I'm reflecting what she's saying and feeling. I reflect. And then she opened up to me and she said, "Dad, you'll never believe it. The girls, they were making fun of me at dance. And so when I stopped to talk to the girls, my teacher, she stopped the music and she called me out in front of everyone." And I said, "Oh," so not only is she embarrassed why these girls are making fun of her, but now this teacher says, "You need to pay attention and quit talking." And so then my heart goes out to her and I reflect again. And I say, "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. It sounds like you had a rough day at dance. That must have been so hard. That must have been so embarrassing for you." And so that's so much more helpful than the lecture or the dismissing that emotion, is hold up that emotional mirror. And so again, if we remember back when a child is experiencing a strong emotion, when they're experiencing an intense emotion, which she was, it is not the time to teach her anything. It's not to say, "Well, you just need to, next time, what you need to do is you need to tell those friends, or you need to tell your teacher, or next time, let's go in and talk to your teacher." No. None of that. When someone is in the midst of a strong emotion is not the time to teach. It's simply reflect. Hold up that emotional mirror. So on the way home, I just reflect. I say, "No wonder you want to quit dance." I don't tell her she can or she can't, but I just am dealing with the emotions. So the principle here is emotional wounds require emotional first aid. That we apply it, and the way that we do that is we reflect those emotions. Now later on that night, right, set limits and problem solve, that 5th step, I needed to problem solve. So later that night, when she had calmed down and her bottle was down and mine was down, I go in and I sit on her bed and we have a conversation. And I say to her, wow, it sounds like you had a really rough day today. She says, yeah, Dad, I don't want to quit dance. I love dance. I just don't know what to do. So when now she's calm, now we can brainstorm and I can say, what do you think we should do? And I ask her. And then she says some things and I say some things that then we can problem solve. But in the heat of the moment, reflect. That's the principle that can build understanding and compassion. And that's really what children need, is reflecting. So holding up the emotional mirror. Another principle for building understanding of children is really slowing down and trying to see things not only from their perspective, but to set realistic expectations. Expectations for their age, their stage of life. For example, it would be unrealistic to think a 2 or a 3-year-old, let's say you're having a birthday party for your 7-year-old and your 2 or 3-year-old wants to participate and you have a cake and you put the cake on the table and you look at the child, don't you touch that cake. Then you go over and you help your children. What's that child going to do? It's going to go right for the cake. That's unrealistic to have that expectation that they can control themselves, or at the grocery store, now you just sit here and you sit still. Children can't do that. And so when we can understand child development and their ages and stages, and age for potty training is different, right? Or electronics, or how much they should spend here, their expectations about problem solving or being able to control their temper, things like that, that can build understanding. And remember again that we were children once, and they're still learning. They're in the process of learning. Now think about the last time that you learned something. Maybe you're learning a new principle, or learning a new skills. Maybe it's some money management or some computer skills. Now think back to when you're trying to learn something. Do you enjoy it when the instructor, the teacher, is very critical or sarcastic or puts you down or says, well, why don't you understand what's going on? Why can't you just catch on to this? Or why did you do it that way? And they get after you, or they're critical, they're sarcastic, like, oh my goodness, you'll never learn this. In a lot of ways, we do that with our own children. When we have to remember that they're still learning. They're learning how, and so we need to be patient as we teach them. And they'll be more open to that teaching if we do it in a way that is kind and compassionate. We have that relationship, and we can move up a little into the pyramid a little bit into the teaching area. And we can be a little bit more patient, kind, and think back, okay, yep, I was a child once. And it takes some understanding. So if we can realize that for ourselves, we don't like that when others are critical of us, when we're trying to learn something for the first time. We love it when they're patient and they're kind and they're understanding with us, and they show us with example. And when we mess up, maybe they show us again and they're kind. So that can create more understanding and compassion for our children, and when they're going through emotional struggles as well. So I think, in summary, really trying to see parenting from the big picture, coming back to where we started, right? What is your purpose for parenting? What's your view of parenting? What do you hope to accomplish? And whatever that is, hopefully it is raising children that are well behaved, that listen, that have compassion, that can show love, that are kind, that are grateful. And we have to model that. We have to model that as parents. If we want our children to have those types of qualities, then we need to teach those and show them through our own example. So to wrap up, I hope that you'll take one or two of these principles that we've talked about, and maybe think about some of the regrets of empty nest parents. What do they regret? They regret it's that harshness. It's not being patient enough. And slow down and enjoy the now. With whatever stage of life, if you've got little ones, if you're empty nester right now, slow down and enjoy that stage of life that you're in. Slow down and be a little more kind. Be a little bit more caring and compassionate and understanding. Instead of quick to dismiss their emotions or to disapprove, we can slow down and emotion coach them. We can try to feel what they're feeling. Be patient through that process. So take one of these principles and try it. Implement it. Be patient with yourself. And of course, keep that tone down. And above all, remember to reflect. Hold up that emotional mirror when your children are experiencing strong emotions.